because being on the internet for as long as some people are, there are side effects. So, yeah.
Well, now without naming the accounts, I can think of at least 3, so it's not easy to pin. There will be the protection of this. I can think of more than one account that's succumbed to this. There is definitely, you spend too much time on the internet. On the one hand, it does train you to think a certain way, and it's not necessarily a healthy way. You spend too much time on the internet, you start to potentially see things that are not there necessarily, and view things as everything is an existential life or death fight. And also, you spend enough time on the internet, and you do see accounts that, it is interesting, the honeypotting. And like the traditional ways of honeypotting are always through the 2 most popular ones, sex or money. And that's how those Chinese communist spies get into the party, through sex or through money. And on Twitter or on the internet, the other way of poisoning the well, it's true, is getting people to compromise themselves, either through a propensity to believe what confirms their bias and thus sharing information that turns out to be false. And these disinformation campaigns have existed forever in one form or another, and have oftentimes been government-sponsored disinformation campaigns so they can discredit leaders of movements or movements themselves. And I'm noticing a ton of it now. And then, the more, what's the word when you're generous with giving the benefit of the doubt? I guess. Oh, come on. Whatever. I'll get the word in a second. But the more charitable interpretation to some of the disinformation laundering that ends up discrediting the sources is, something starts off as a joke, it gets amputated from the original joke, and then people think it's real. And then the classic one occurred the other day, and I almost shared it, but like, this is too stupid to be real, was created by the Dilly team, and maybe it was intended to be a joke, but then people amputate the joke from the joke, and then people think that's a real video, share it around, discredit themselves, and then lo and behold, the government gets to say, oh, we need to tamp down on disinformation. You can't trust that account anymore, and that's how this political war is fought in the digital age. So yeah, no, those are. You spend enough time on the internet, you got to watch out for everything, and you're better off almost not tweeting something that is true versus tweeting something that's false. But yeah, no, the honeypotting is taking on a new form now on steroids, which is putting out the disinformation, getting prominent accounts to share that disinformation so that the dishonest, lying media can then discredit those accounts. And it's sort of, I believe, exactly what they actually did with Alex Jones and Sandy Hook. But
ironically, I kind of fell victim to this once as well when the assassination attempt of Donald Trump took place. I shared a post, which I then took down like 2 minutes later because I didn't find the actual source. I put out a post which apparently was the image and what did it call it? The manifesto was apparently a screenshot of a YouTube video, which is the manifesto of the shooter, and that was false, right? I took that, ran with that, I posted that out there, then I looked for the source afterwards, and I was like, fuck, it's not real. And I deleted it immediately, of course, but that's one of those examples where, I think a lot of people will be pointing the blame at certain accounts, and this is, I think, more true than, you can say, okay, there are legitimate honeypots out there, okay, cool, that's a thing, but I think also there could be common mistake, and this can take on the form of you accidentally poisoning the well, or this can take on the form of you yourself just having gone insane. Again, I think if you spend enough time on the internet doing the things that some people do, and I think a lot of, accounts around the MAGA ethosphere, that they will experience this, you just become insane, because all this revolutionary style campaigning, it's not good for the human mind, it's not good for anyone, and I think at some point you just literally lose your mind. So I think that's also something that we're seeing at scale currently. So it's not just intentionally honeypotting, it's just you honeypot yourself.
No, well, absolutely. I mean, look, you practice law for long enough, and I mean, again, this was my observation even before I became thoroughly embedded in the internet, is that you go through litigation enough, and you develop what I always called litigation trauma. You don't trust anybody. You don't trust the judges. You don't trust, and maybe even rightly so. You don't trust your attorneys. Everyone's out to get you. It's always a big grand conspiracy because nothing goes your way in litigation. And so you spend enough time in litigation, it will, I don't know if it's scientifically rewiring your brain, but it will it'll skew the way you see reality, because you will see conspiracy everywhere. And absolutely it exists on the internet. And I'm thoroughly convinced, when Alex Jones did his deposition back in 2018, it might have been before that, where he says, I was going through a form of psychosis back in the Sandy Hook and seeing conspiracies where they didn't exist. The media ran with the psychosis as though it was a clinical diagnosis, but I knew exactly what he meant. Is you're living in a world where you are day in and day out living in not perceived conspiracy, but conspiracies that actually occurred throughout history. Actual crisis actors, not in the Sandy Hook sense, prior, in wartime, actual doctored images, and then you end up seeing conspiracy where it doesn't exist, and you make one big mistake and it'll cost you $1 billion when the media does not want to forgive and forget. They want to remember and discredit. But the irony is, jumping on things too quickly, seeing racism everywhere. CNN gets to see racism in a 16-year-old boy with Nicholas Sandmann. They get to go back to business as usual. But if you're politically disfavored and you make that mistake, they will hold it against you for the rest of your life. But certainly, the more time you spend, the more you know, unfortunately, the more you might see things that don't actually exist in real time, which is where you have to really take the step back and reflect and just, do your best. But everybody is entitled to make mistakes when they tweet and delete them, but the bigger the account, the more likely someone's going to screen grab it and hold it against you for the rest of your life.
Exactly, yeah. And especially this is something where there is a time where you have to consider something interesting about the internet, and this is something that is relevant for everyone. How abstract are your thoughts? Because one day, the humans crave abstraction in one form or another, and they will just jump on that, and you just become